Hi everyone. We are still in the early stages of the metaverse, but already creators, researchers, and organizations around the world are working to unlock the potential of AR and VR to transform education, workforce training, healthcare, and the global economy. The metaverse will not be built by any one organization. It will be built by a range of companies, large and small, civil society, the public sector, and millions of individual creators. That's why we at Meta are so excited that Economist Impact will be organizing a series of global events this fall and into 2023 to explore the value of the metaverse. The first event is in Northeast Asia, where industry, government, and civil society leaders have in many ways already been leading the way to help build the metaverse. As we work together on the next computing platform, it is so important that we ensure open and transparent dialogue across sectors and across regions. Thank you to Economist Impact for helping us start this important dialogue.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our event discussing economic opportunities in virtual worlds. I'm Tom Standage, Deputy Editor of The Economist. This is the first in a series of 3 webinars under the title Leading the Way into the Metaverse, Northeast Asia's Potential, sponsored by Meta. So we thank Meta for their generous support. Before we begin, a couple of quick housekeeping items. First, it's best to use Google Chrome to view this webinar. So if anything seems not to be working properly, try switching browsers. Also, there's a box that allows you to download a selection of further reading on today's topic. And you can find full biographies for all of today's speakers underneath this media player. Okay, on with the show. Virtual worlds, collectively known as the metaverse, are expected to unlock new economic opportunities for individuals, creators, communities, and businesses across multiple industries. They have the potential to profoundly change how consumers and companies interact with products, services, and each other. Evangelists of the metaverse have promised a bright future in this virtual realm. But what's the nature of the economic opportunity and how real is it? To discuss all this, I'm delighted to be joined today by Sir Nick Clegg, President for Global Affairs at Meta. He joined the company in 2018 after almost 2 decades in British and European politics, including 5 years as Britain's Deputy Prime Minister. Nick Clegg, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's good to be with you.
Now, I think it would be helpful to start with the question of what the metaverse is exactly, because I think many people first heard the term after Facebook renamed itself to Meta last year, and they may be under the impression that the metaverse is a sort of proprietary product being developed by your company, which is not the case, is it? So what exactly is the metaverse?
No, it's very much not the case. I mean, the metaverse will be built regardless of whether Meta, the company, builds it or even exists. And it's not, crucially, it's not one piece of hardware. It's not one app. It's not a feature. It's really the sort of next generation computing platform. It really is like not quite starting all over again, but it's like building a new internet. And whilst in many ways that sounds revolutionary, it's also relatively evolutionary. If you look at where we've come from, desktop to laptop to mobile phones to sending people emails by text and then sending photographs, and now short form video is one of the most popular formats that you see on the internet. All of those technological developments are heading in one direction, namely greater presence, so that when you are talking to people, when you are communicating with people, that you really feel you're with them, even if you're physically apart. That has always been the promise, if you like, of the internet, and the metaverse is the most developed exposition of it, or at least will be in the years to come. So you and I, in future, will not have to stare at each other at sort of flat screens, at these sort of passport-style photographs. We will be able to sit virtually around a table and feel that we are breathing the same air in the same room, even though we might be thousands of miles apart.
Okay, and just to be clear, there's only going to be one metaverse, right? Not multiple metaverses. It's not going to be like the Fortnite metaverse and the Microsoft metaverse and your metaverse and so on.
No, but it's like the internet. The internet is the internet, but the internet, of course, is composed of all sorts of different operating systems and features and products and services, and the metaverse will be the same. And it's incidentally one of the reasons why, in my view, one of the most important principles we need to bake into the development of the metaverse, whoever's building their bit of it, whether it's Meta or Apple or Google or Sony or whoever, we need to make sure that the products and the services are as interoperable as possible, so that the users of the metaverse don't get locked in a sort of different silo, in a kind of Apple metaverse and a Microsoft metaverse and a Google metaverse and so on. That would really, in a sense, destroy the very promise of what this augmented and virtual reality technology offers. And so we're already in the industry doing quite a lot of work. For instance, Meta was a founding member of something called the XR Association, which brings together industry, brings together thinkers, academics, regulators, and policymakers to start thinking now, before it's too late, or before, in a sense, rules have already been invented in the technology, to think now about what's needed to make it a open and interoperable metaverse, not a balkanized and fragmented one.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit more, because we already see examples of very popular virtual worlds like Fortnite and Roblox and so on, but they are separate. You can't move between them. You can't take objects between them. So what will encourage the interconnection of these virtual worlds? And why won't we end up with separate walled gardens like we have with in other fields like social media?
Well, I think that's exactly why we need to, in a sense, avoid what happened with the last great sort of transformation in the internet, which is that the technology erupted very quickly, and thinkers and decision makers and regulators and policymakers have been spending a lot of time since then almost trying to catch up with the reality which had already been invented by the private sector pioneers. I think it's so important this time to build the metaverse in a spirit of partnership. And I tell you the reason why I think in the end it will be possible to encourage all the companies to do something which you're quite right to imply is not necessarily something which comes to them naturally, namely to make sure that their products and their services are interoperable with others. Because if they don't, users simply won't use the metaverse as much as they could. If you could, can you imagine an internet system where you can't send an email from one email provider to another, that you can't send a photo from one messaging system to another? That kind of highly fragmented metaverse, much as just imagining what a highly fragmented current internet would look like, would be such a negative user experience. I think that is reason enough to incentivize people to work together.
I hope you're right. I can imagine an internet where you can't do that, because that's exactly the internet we have with social media. If I'm using one platform and you're using another platform, I can't, send you a friend request or something like that. But yes, I hope we do end up with a sort of internet style set of common protocols. Well, let's assume we do, and we can communicate between these virtual worlds. We can move between them. We can move objects between them. And people are already doing economic activity in some of these virtual worlds, like Roblox, and of course Second Life. You can buy virtual clothes and other items. How is this going to create economic opportunity, and where do you think the biggest opportunities are going to lie?
Well, the opportunity is enormous and difficult in a sense to really estimate, in the way that it was very difficult to estimate how the digital transformation, the advent of the internet itself would have such a profound effect on productivity and economic growth around the world when that first emerged many years ago. But we, for instance, funded a research from a research outfit called Analysis Group, and they've estimated that over the next 10 years, the metaverse and metaverse technologies and metaverse goods and services could contribute around $3 trillion of additional revenue, of additional growth to the global economy. And about a third of that would be generated in the Asia Pacific region. And you can, if you just sort of imagine, almost anything we do in the real world will be able to manifest itself in the metaverse, whether it's creativity, visual, audio, music, concerts, whether it is the goods and services. Those goods and services themselves will have a digital manifestation in the metaverse. People will be able to buy and sell clothes and furniture and other goods and fashion products. It really is in a sense, almost a question of the sky is the limit. And what we need to do is encourage creators to start now dabbling in the metaverse, to start feeling for themselves how ingenious they can be in the metaverse, and also create a good living for themselves. And that's something, by the way, which is happening particularly in some of the markets in Northeast Asia. I mean, if you look in Korea, Japan, Taiwan, some of the most ingenious creators are already located in those economies.
Well, if this does indeed create new economic opportunities on a large scale, what impact do you think that could have on inclusion and equality or inequality? Because isn't there a risk that this is just an online playground for the rich? Don't you need some quite expensive equipment to participate in these kinds of environments?
I think it's important to think about this as a new form of infrastructure. It's a new fundamental form of infrastructure by which we will live and work and communicate and play in the years. It's not there to replace real life. Nothing will replace the sense of immediacy that you and I, Tom, can have if we actually are having this conversation in real life. But it can get very, very close to emulating that, much closer than any previous technology. That is what this technology promises. And with any new infrastructure, whether it's cars, whether it's mobile phones, whether it's email, whether it's trains, any form of infrastructure, you're always going to quite rightly ask the same thing, which is it going to be inexpensive and accessible enough for people to use? To which the answer always is, well, yes, if enough people use it, it will eventually become, so prevalent and ubiquitous across society that it is in effect, a universal form of infrastructure available to everybody. And that's precisely what we hope for, not next year or even the year after. This is clearly a big turning of the page technologically, but I see no reason why metaverse technology should be any more exclusive than previous technologies. When the mobile phone was first invented, everyone said, this is just a rich person's plaything. People in the developing world are never going to use mobile phones. And now some of the best mobile phone networks in the world are in the developing world. So I think we'll be equally surprised by how effective we become, as long as the use cases are as fruitful, enjoyable, and enriching as I believe they will be, that they will become accessible technologies for all to use.
Yes, and there's lots of evidence that the economic impact of mobile telephony and smartphones is much greater in the developing world because it makes up for lack of infrastructure in other areas. Well,
exactly, and just imagine what the metaverse will do for commuting, for this idea that we all need to be sort of hot-housed in offices together. The metaverse could make, not for all industries, but could make that feel for many industries like a very sort of quaint, old-fashioned thing of the past, and people will now be able to work where they want to be located in different parts of the world. So it should have, in that important respect, quite an equalizing effect on economic activity and make it geographically much more accessible than it currently is.
Okay, now let's look at Northeast Asia in particular. Historically, Japan led the way on smartphones about 20 years ago, South Korea on broadband adoption, and Taiwan now leads the world in chip making. So do you think the region has particular opportunities when it comes to the metaverse?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, as you just rightly said, if you look at those three countries, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, I mean, it's remarkable what pioneers they have been. Japan, of course, has a long-standing, vibrant and world-leading game developer and creator community. I was just reading the other day that I think it was a Japanese startup cluster hosted and organized the first ever VR music event back in 2017. 5,000 people, participated. You go to some Japanese schools. I was reading about the NNS high schools where people are using our technology. Quest 2, around 4,000 students are learning in virtual reality. And then, everybody knows how world famous Korea is for its creativity, and I mean, look at the way that K-pop groups are driving the metaverse concept already, and even in politics, the last two presidential candidates had a debate as their own avatars in the metaverse in the last election. And as you say, of course, Taiwan now accounts for over 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors. So it is a part of the world, Northeast Asia, particularly those three countries, which is already the hub for so much ingenuity, but not just on the hardware, not just on the software, but also on the creativity, also on the way in which creators are using it. And I fully expect that to manifest itself in the future. I suspect all three countries will be some of the leading metaverse economies in the future. And I only wish other countries would emulate their lead.
Okay, and very quickly, if we fast forward 2 years, say, what do you think will have changed? What progress will we have made towards this universe of connected worlds, and how will it be changing people's lives, do you think?
Well, look, first I should say, I don't think the metaverse is going to be fully formed in 2 years. It's a much longer term project than that, but certainly over the next 2 years, speaking for this company, Meta, and for I think some of the other major investors, you will see new products, lighter, more wearable headsets, a greater sense of presence and immediacy through the avatars, and of course, eventually those avatars hopefully will evolve into holograms of ourselves. I think you'll see real progress in the kind of lifelike avatars and on the services that are available for people to use, from gaming to fitness, from music concerts to places to have your Monday morning work meeting. I think in all of those areas you'll see real advances in the next 24 months.
Okay, great. I'm a big fan of VR workouts, so I'm living in the future already. It'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds. So Nick Clegg, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thanks also to Meta for sponsoring this webinar, and thank you in the audience for watching. Do stay tuned for our panel discussion. But from me, thank you and goodbye.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this panel discussion, Economic Opportunities in the Virtual World. My name is Charles Ross, and I'm a Principal of Policy and Insights at Economist Impact. And it's a real pleasure to be able to spend the next 45 minutes with you discussing this really fascinating topic. A big thanks, first up, to Meta for generously supporting this interactive virtual panel discussion. And a big thank you to my panelists, who I'm delighted to introduce. Firstly, we have Professor Cao, who is the head of Taipei Tech's Department of Interaction Design and chair of the National Taipei University of Technology. She serves as the director of the Metaverse R&D Center and host of Interactive Art Lab, both at NTUT. She's also vice president of the Metaverse Association of Taiwan and director of the Taiwan Creativity Development Association. A big welcome to Professor Cao here today. And to Takatane Kyochu, Executive Director of the Japan Metaverse Association. Takatane was elected to Japan's House of Representatives for 2 terms, from 2009 through to 2017. He was also responsible for passing the country's crypto asset law in April 2017. You'll find the full biographies of each of our speakers underneath the console with you here today. So feel free to dig a little bit more deeper into each of our panelists. But before I get into the discussion here today, just a quick reminder of why we're discussing this topic today and why it is important. Now, virtual worlds, collectively known as the metaverse, are expected to help unlock economic opportunities for individuals, creators, communities, and businesses across industries, and profoundly change how businesses and consumers interact with products, services, and each other. So Nick Clegg talked a little bit about this earlier on, about those economic opportunities. He would be in that basket of one of these ardent evangelists of the metaverse who have promised a bright future in the virtual world. And while there is no debating that the potential opportunity is significant, there are still some questions about how the potential opportunity, the economic opportunity, will be distributed. And today, we want to explore these questions with a focus in particular on the countries of Japan and Taiwan, where my panelists are from, to understand how the success they've seen in previous technological revolutions may translate into success within the metaverse and help them generate their own economic opportunities. So it's a real pleasure to have this discussion with them today. So let's get straight into it. I want to start with both of you, if I may, to get your perspective on this, to understand from a Japan, from a Taiwan perspective, how real and how large is the opportunity in the metaverse. Takatani, maybe I can start with you on that question, and welcome to the panel discussion today.
Hi, good morning. My name is Kyuchi. In Tokyo, everybody is talking about Web3, metaverse, NFT every day. And for example, 3 weeks ago, the largest Japanese bank, Mitsubishi UFJ Bank, decided to invest in Animoca brands. The amount was only $22 million, so which is not that big, but the most conservative Japanese bank has decided to invest in like Web3 area. So everybody is talking about Web3. And the definition of Web3 and metaverse is quite vague because when people talk about metaverse, people usually talk about like NFT, which is a crypto asset. And back in 2017, quite a number of people in Japan made a fortune out of this crypto asset. But when you talk about Bitcoin and crypto asset, people tend to think it's still dodgy business. But now it's becoming more sophisticated and lots of people are starting to invest. Having said that, the size is still small, but everybody is talking, the large corporates are starting to invest, and I see very bright future. Having said that, there will be a couple of years to go until it really takes off. And in Japan, there's still lots of barriers to the entry of this metaverse.
It's a really positive early sign that we are seeing some early investments in there, particularly coming from some of the big Japanese companies as well. That's obviously a really good indicator that there's some strong opportunity which is going to come from the metaverse. So thank you very much, Takatani, for sharing that view. Professor Tsao, from your perspective, what are you seeing in terms of, are people talking about the metaverse? Are we seeing this as a large opportunity within your market?
I think that is unclear at this moment, but I personally believe it will be huge. There will be obstacles and many different stages to growth, but in the end, I think it is on the path to exponential growth. I want to talk about my Taiwan experience maybe later, so I can share my experience for all of you.
Yeah, excellent. I'd love to dig into that. I know you're obviously heavily involved within the metaverse and associations within your country, and so you're keen to understand. That's obviously a really good indicator of how much activity and excitement there is about the metaverse. But before we get on to that, I just want to sort of understand from a sort of a Taiwan and Japan experience around the metaverse. Both of your markets have done really well in those previous sort of technological revolutions around the internet, smartphone adoption, chip making from the hardware perspective, so really thrived within those areas. And I'm wondering to what extent you think the experience of doing well in the previous incarnations of the internet has set you up for success within this incarnation in terms of the metaverse. Takatani, maybe I could start with you on that one. How well do you think that previous success around Japan and say in particular smartphone adoption, how well has that set you up or for success within the metaverse?
Well, in the past technology, I think Japan has struggled very much. Looking at all the successful companies, the so-called GAFA, Sony is trying to catch up a little bit these days, but we don't have Honda, we don't have Sony right now, so we are having very difficult time in Japan in technology-wise. For example, semiconductor, back in 1990, we had over 50% of the market share, but now, we only have 3-4% market share. So we have lots of we have done lots of mistakes having too strong regulations, too strong consumer protection, etc. So we have to be more regulation-free country in order to catch up with all these new technologies in the metaverse area.
Yeah, I'll dig into some of those particular challenges in a moment or a little bit later, particularly around that regulation piece, which I know is so key within a Japanese context. But I really hope that Japan does learn from their experiences of the past, because this is a new opportunity and this is clearly new economic opportunities at stake for this. Professor Cao, from your perspective, how well positioned do you think Taiwan is to take advantage of these economic opportunities based on sort of what you've learned from the past and your successes?
In the past, well, we know Taiwan is famous for its hardware. Some like HTC, they build goggles, VR goggles, and other forms of XR hardware. We also have some companies producing more traditional forms of computing hardware and chips that the metaverse will require. So I think it's very big opportunity for us, but we must focus on company to make the software and the creative content. We have metaverse fashion show, something like that. Where real objects are integrated into a virtual environment. Sometimes customers who purchase NFT on blockchain, so they have the option of purchasing tangible or virtual clothing. Also, some people, they can make metaverse fashion first on 3D models. I think it's very big opportunity for to connect virtual and the physical world in the future is my experience in Taiwan.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for sharing. And I think from a Taiwan perspective, that experience from a hardware perspective is key. If you were listening a little bit earlier, so Nick Clegg was talking about this as one of those barriers in terms of being able to have widespread adoption of the metaverse is to reduce the hardware costs to the metaverse and improve the hardware itself to improve that particular experience. Until that cost comes down, we're not going to have widespread adoption. It is going to be for the sort of the privileged few, if you like, who are able to afford the technology. Professor Cao, you're just talking about sort of this interlinkage between the real and the virtual worlds. And I just wanted to dig into that a little bit more with you to understand what will commerce in the metaverse mean for retailers, consumers, and creators. I know you work a lot in that space, and particularly in the arts community as well. What is it going to mean for them? What are the early signs that you're seeing in terms of what they're using it for?
We have established the first one metaverse R&D center in Taiwan. We try a lot of project to like cost down or to connect the hardware and the software successful. So I think maybe there will always just be one economy, like more and more we will see crossover in terms of finance, communications, and purchases. Many purchases, for example, we have a real as well as a virtual environment. Maybe we can try to think about it more.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Just sort of keep touching on those examples of what we're seeing in these early stages of the metaverse. Takatane, keen to hear from you what you're seeing in terms of early usage of the metaverse. Which industries might be showing some good examples of where they may be getting some economic value out of the metaverse? If you could share with us.
I think one industry would be gaming, online gaming, blockchain. And because we have the Nintendo and Sony, two giant gaming companies, there are lots of software gaming companies, and they're all trying to enter this blockchain NFT play-to-earn business model, like the Axie Infinity type. My friend just launched dog walk gaming. You have to feed them to buy your dog food. You have to buy it. And if you take them for a walk, you get some token, which is exchangeable to Bitcoin and Ethereum. So it's a play-to-earn business model, which was launched just 1st of September. But there are many gaming software companies in Japan which are still small, but which are doing quite well. So I think that will be one area which will be very successful.
Yeah, I think the dog walking, feeding application is an interesting one. Maybe one way of my son has been pushing for us to get a dog. Maybe this is one way of us him experiencing having a dog, trying it out before actually having one, which I think is one of the big advantages of the metaverse, that you can experience things and it's sort of easy access to those pieces. Takatani, you talked about some Sony and Nintendo earlier, and obviously the gaming applications for this. And so these are sort of some standalone platforms, if you like, where they can build a metaverse environment and experience. And I guess it asked me to think about one of the barriers that I see around the metaverse is that sort of interoperability between the different platforms, whether you're within a sort of a Nintendo world or a Sony world or a Meta world, for example. Do you see that as a big issue, as an obstacle that we may be able to overcome, that we can have some sort of operability between these different platforms?
I don't think so. I mean, it would be much easier to kind of resolve those issues between Nintendo platform and Sony platform, because all the game software companies, they produce software for both companies. So I don't think that's a big issue. But talking about some barriers, for example, this dog walk gaming thing, we want to have a dog race. However, this is against the Japanese gambling law. Like in many countries, like for example, in the United Kingdom, you have the William Hill bookmaker. In Japan, we cannot do gambling in that sense. We do have horse race, we have boat race, we have lots of gambling, but we don't have casinos yet. So we want to, if this dog race, we can start this dog race thing, it will be such a big gambling new business. But because we have so much regulations, I don't think we gave up doing this dog race.
Yeah, I can absolutely see this. The gambling applications here could be immense in terms of sort of the economic opportunity there. You obviously, in terms of your time as a member of parliament within Japan, were sort of responsible for setting and helping sort of guide some of the regulation around some of these sorts of areas, or the precursors to these areas. Do you see some of these regulation challenges you've been calling out as things which Japan can overcome quickly, readily, easily, or is it going to be a long fight? Or what's your view on that?
Going back to 2017 April, I was a member of the parliament at the time, and I was involved in this crypto asset law. At that time, we were, I think, quite early stage, but we managed to set up this law at the early stage. However, one problem we had was I was not in charge of the tax issues. In Japan, if you make income out of this crypto asset, you are charged 55% tax rate, which so lots of promising companies come to Tokyo to start business. However, they give up and go to Singapore, Hong Kong, Taipei, and to start, and they run away from Japan. The reason is very simple. The tax rate, 55%, is too high. And we've been asking the government, as a member of the parliament, I asked the government, and now outside the politics, I'm asking as a businessman to reduce taxes. And maybe this might happen next year or the year after. Well, we are hoping to do that. Otherwise, all the metaverse-related companies will escape from Tokyo.
Well, I certainly hope that is not the case. I mean, like any sort of technological innovation, it's difficult for regulators to keep up, but vital that they do so in order to help the country to remain competitive within this new space. Professor Tsao, from your perspective, what sort of barriers are you seeing to sort of widespread adoption and capturing those economic opportunities in Taiwan? What are you seeing?
Well, let me think about it. I think we have a complicated law and policy and political. So apart from the difficult of Taiwan, we also the economic business model is so small. We also have very complicated something like roles or that we have to negotiate to work toward the metaverse. I think in the future, we must delete the boundary of all of it, according to more investment to come to Taiwan to have more opportunity for us. I think it's the biggest challenge now.
Excellent. Just want to, sort of thinking back to the experience of previous sort of technologies which we've seen develop, what is really key to their success is having a really strong ecosystem within a particular country, a particular market to help grow it and develop it. And I know, Professor Tsao, this is an area within the Metaverse Association within Taiwan, which you're pretty actively involved in. Can you give us a sort of a feel for what that ecosystem looks like, how big it is, what sort of people are participating within that ecosystem, and are we doing it enough? Does it need to grow more?
I think Taiwan is very small, so we are used to work with each other together. So to create the ecosystem is easy for us. We have hardware, software, and programming developed, so we can easy to catch all of it. So also we will easy to find each other in the metaverse over the world. We also have a lot of talented XR developed. So the most difficult part is, I think, is attracting attention international audience to focus on our creative platform or content or whatever, something like that. And firstly, we also need the enough investment. I think it will help to grow, to scale our metaverse impact.
You talked about how the metaverse makes it easier for your sort of ecosystem to connect. That's sort of fascinating. I'd love to hear a bit more about how that is possible. Nick Clegg a little bit earlier was talking about how he has meetings with his sort of global team using the metaverse when they can't all be together in person. Are you doing something similar? Are you using it day to day in your life, Professor Tsao?
Yeah, because in my R&D, Metaverse R&D Center, we always collect all of the talent XR XR talent to use our equipment, and we also support some money or some resources from our university to help them. Last month, we also published, with the Taipei government, we also published the first Metaverse white paper to connect with the government, university, and industry. I hope maybe it will be helpful for our developer in Taiwan.
Yeah, that's really interesting to see. I think from my own perspective, I'm more of a sort of explorer of metaverse worlds rather than actually using it for sort of business related reasons or to connect with people. Takatane, what about yourself? Have you personally sort of leveraged the power of the metaverse to sort of connect with colleagues or peers, or what sort of use cases might have you done yourself? Or are you like me and you're just a bit of a voyeur at this stage?
I'm probably a bit like you. I still have lots of difficulties in easy to connect kind of platform to use metaverse at the moment. And because I have some investment banking background, people ask me, what to invest and but all these investments are a little bit of a long shot or medium shot. It takes 3-4 years to actually make cash flow. However, there has been some small market cap public companies in Japan. For example, $30 million market cap company, which does art auction called Shinwa Wise Holding. They started Edoverse. Edo is an old name for Tokyo. Tokyoverse kind of platform, and the market cap went 4 times in 2 months, in like May, June timing. Versus stock pick, which went 4 times. And there's another small company called GFA. They have a kind of disco dancing club, and they started Camelot Metaverse. And now their stock price is picking up. So lots of people are looking into metaverse kind of stocks. So I can see lots of people trying to make money from this metaverse thing, but most of them are not actual metaverse. It's mostly like NFT rather than metaverse. So what I said in the beginning, definition of metaverse and NFT is a little bit different, but so many people, I think about 100,000 people in Japan became a millionaire back in 2017 from the successful Bitcoin bubble back in 2017. So lots of people are looking into dreams come true again, kind of. And the one barrier we are facing is we don't have large capital venture investments. But these individual investors who made a fortune out of this crypto asset, they were investing like, a couple of $1 million in various areas. And after a couple of years, I think, quite many companies will be a successful one. And maybe some of them may become unicorns in Japan.
Yeah, you mentioned sort of some of the small investors at the moment you were just talking about there. You mentioned a little bit earlier that there are starting to be some signs of some big investors coming in. Mitsubishi as one. I think SoftBank is also making some investments in the spaces as well. So that is positive. I like the idea of a metaverse world around the dance floor, the nightclub, which you talked about a little bit earlier. You can sort of see the appeal, particularly I hesitate to say a post-COVID world, but clearly sort of the pandemic has opened our eyes to the opportunity and to do these things in a safer way, in a more virtual, safer way. I guess just a question around that, and this one for you, Professor Cao. Do you think it's possible that the virtual world economy will ever overtake the real world economy, or will the distinction cease to matter? We will have one or the other, or are we just going to have a blend of the economies? Professor Cao.
The early days, we will mostly see lots of new hardware in Taiwan, but related to the metaverse, we should see the hardware price down platform, lending to more and more audience come to the metaverse platform. And we also focus on the VTuber. The VTuber economy is very huge. So I think after the new infrastructure is in place and enough people has access, then we should see lots of new kind of contents in the metaverse. I think is our big issue to focus on in the future.
Excellent. We have a couple of questions coming in from our audience now. I just want to pose to both of you. The first one is, will there be only one metaverse? Are we talking about sort of one internet, and will there be one metaverse that people to go to, or will there be sort of multiple metaverses that people sort of interact? I want to go here for that or there for that type of thing. Professor Tsao, Takatane, a view on this, one or multiple metaverses? Professor Tsao, you want to go first?
Depends on Charles. Yeah, it's I want to let me think.
No problem. You have a think. Takatane, what do you think? One or multiple metaverses? Where do you think we're going to go?
I think that there will be multiple metaverse worlds. However, there will be kind of de facto platform. So people won't be using small metaverse world. They tend to go to the large ones. So if you have a very sophisticated, good service metaverse platform, I don't think it will be successful. If, for example, Meta starts one platform, nobody can win against them. So that's maybe one big issue, because all the GAFA companies come in, and if they buy this new company, it will be all absorbed into the large platform. So there might be some problems in having a new technology out of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sort of history shows that lots of this stuff does ultimately get dominated by a few different platforms. And you called out that Meta has played as an early play in terms of sort of being one of those partners there. It'd be interesting to see who else is going to take a sort of a large piece of the metaverse there as well. I do have some other questions here. Let me go to now. So this question for the audience is, do you believe that Northeast Asia, specifically your own markets, Taiwan and Japan, are ahead of other countries when it comes to their progression in the metaverse? Are you leading the pack at the moment? Where do you think you stand? Professor Tsao, I'd love to hear from you on that.
Last question, I think for me, the metaverse platform is no boundary. So it something like a very big platform over the world. Everyone can enjoy it. Certainly, I think it could be similar to the introduction of the internet. I think the metaverse will be more similar to the introduction of a Facebook plus Netflix plus the gaming platform. So it will depend on the number of users. They will create some content in the metaverse. We can co-create everything in the metaverse.
Yeah, no, really, really good points. And Takatane, just on that question of where do you think sort of Japan sits in terms of this race to capture the economic opportunities of the metaverse? Are you some early signs, maybe regulations holding you back a little bit? Where do you think they stand, and who do you think are the major players at the moment?
Frankly speaking, Japan is not leading at the moment. However, we have the telecom infrastructures, we have some gaming industry, we have some large economy. Although our economy is struggling, we're the number number 3 economy in the world. So we do have hardware technology and also some software technologies. So we have all the elements to be successful in this world. But at the moment, things are looking far too slow from my side. For example, as I said again, the tax issue. This one tax issue can destroy all the metaverse in Tokyo. So I think we need to be very quick and moving forward.
Excellent. Well, I hope some of those policymakers are listening to this and getting some urgency in terms of setting those working on those regulations which are required. Another question for the audience here is: are there any key lessons from the dot-com era we can learn from as we enter into the metaverse era? When sort of that question is asked, sort of a couple sort of come out to me. One is the sort of the access sort of in the early days of the internet. A lot of people around the world didn't have access to the internet, whether that's because of connectivity issues or costs of hardware or usable access. So it wasn't in sort of native language, so it wasn't sort of usable once they got there in the first place. So from an access point of view, I think addressing that piece is a key lesson we need to sort of be addressing to be able to get the most value out of the metaverse. Anything jumping out to either of you in terms of the sort of the key lessons from the dot-com era that we can learn from? Takatan, do you want to go first on that one? Anything jumping out to you in terms of those lessons?
Well, I don't know what kind of lessons we need to kind of catch up from the past dot-com things, but one area we have to understand is that I think there will be lots of problems through the consumer protection issues, because everybody will be using this finance platform, and many people will be making losses in the future. Back in 2017, when the Japanese government was very positive about the crypto asset, but there was a hacking problem of US dollar 500 million US dollar. Therefore, suddenly the next day, the government said, no, you cannot do this crypto asset business in Tokyo. So if there will be lots of problems in the future, so if that happens, we can't be too protective about that. Things will happen in the couple of years, I think, from now. And
yeah,
we have to be ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, given we are sort of in the early days of the metaverse, there is an opportunity to be able to set things up properly from a sort of consumer protection, from a privacy sort of point of view, to be able to protect people who are using the metaverse from those types of things. I mean, I believe those are some of the things which are still holding back the internet and trust. The trust element of around e-commerce and interacting on the internet as we know it. These sorts of things are potentially going to be amplified as issues when we get into the metaverse. Professor Cao, anything you're seeing in terms of lessons from the dot-com era that we can learn from for the metaverse?
I think Taiwan's metaverse community is very open and diverse. For my case, everyone can wear goggles, use the internet to join our R&D center and my lab, so we can do anything like learning, meeting, education, gaming from the metaverse. So we saw this successful project in my like Mazu government project or Taipei metaverse white paper project. So I think Taiwan's diverse ecosystem and some experience can share for everyone to the metaverse development.
Excellent. We have about 7 minutes left, and I just want to sort of look to the future now for the last 7 minutes of our discussion here. And so from where we are now, and clearly there's sort of a reasonable amount of excitement in both of your markets, some element of success, although there are a bunch of challenges which you're still facing, which you've both sort of called out as well. From where we are now, where do you see us in 5 years' time? Are we going to get to sort of widespread mass adoption in 5 years' time, where people are genuinely getting, economic value out of the metaverse, or is that too short a time horizon? Where do you think we're going to get there? Takatane, maybe I can start with you on that one. Where do you see Japan in 5 years' time around the metaverse?
I think in 5 years' time, we will be seeing lots of business in concrete stage. However, to be really successful, you may need like 10 to 12 years from now. I mean, if you look back in 2000, there was a kind of IT bubble back in 2000, internet bubble, and we struggled from the Lehman shock. But say back in 2010, none of the GAFA company was the top 10 market cap in the world. All 4 companies are the top 10 right now. So in 10, 12 years, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 might survive, but the other 2 or 3 might be replaced by some new unicorns we don't even know. And if you see Netflix, Airbnb, Uber, they all started business after the Lehman shock in like 2008, 9. And nobody knew about these companies 10 years ago. So it will take like maybe 10 to 12 years.
Yeah, no, really good to call that out, that there is sort of potentially a long payoff for these types of things. And I think what it does say is that it's pretty exciting for innovators out there to know that, to your point, that it is likely that when we do get maturity of the metaverse, there are likely to be new companies who don't exist today who are significant players within the metaverse and gaining significant economic benefit from the metaverse. So innovators from today, it's there is opportunity out there. So keep focusing. Pretty exciting. And Professor Tsao, what about from your perspective in 5 years' time? Where do you think we're going to be?
In the next 5 years, in my opinion, I think maybe we can everyone can use the AR filter to shop virtually in the metaverse, and more and more companies start to try and succeed in the metaverse, and we have very fantasy virtual platforms in the metaverse. One of the earlier retail impact will be try before you buy technology. So everything you can imagine in you can shop in the metaverse and learning and have a meeting, something like that. I think the future is very beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. It does, from what you've both said, sound like there are sort of slightly different time horizons for different markets. Professor Tsao, so you were talking about potentially in 5 years' time, there may be sort of a lot more people interacting with the metaverse and through e-commerce and shopping in particular. And Takatane, from what I take away from your sort of sentiments is that you see this sort of the widespread adoption and the payoff for the metaverse, maybe a longer time frame than that. If any of us had a crystal ball, then probably now is the time to pull it out and try and work out where how this is going to develop and how quickly. Super exciting. We're pretty much out of time today, but it's been a really fascinating discussion to hear, both from a Japan and a Taiwan perspective, what it looks like on the ground in terms of metaverse, the ecosystem which is developing, the amount of excitement and awareness there. We're seeing sort of early investments in Japan coming out, and some of the bigger Japanese companies starting to make some smaller investments now, but a good indication that there is a lot of awareness of the opportunities and some hope that if we can overcome some of those barriers around regulation challenges, which are, seem to be prevalent in Japan, but certainly not unique to Japan, because they are barriers which we need to overcome in every market, not just around the tax implications of this, but around regulations to protect people's consumer rights and privacy, and build trust in the metaverse, which is really keen to gaining that widespread adoption of it. Heard about some really good examples of what's happening on the ground. Professor Zhao, thank you for sharing some of those sort of fashion examples, sorts of things that you're seeing in Taiwan. Very, very exciting to see this. And we talked about some of those sectors which may potentially be the ones ripe for early benefit, whether it's around gaming, whether it's around gambling, if the regulation allows for it, being some of those early examples as well. So, super exciting, super interesting. And I've learned a lot. So thank you very much for your time. So a big thank you to each of my panelists here today, to Professor Zhao for sharing your knowledge about Taiwan, really fascinating, and to Takatani-san for sharing your insight around Japan as well. Really interesting to get that sort of North Asia perspective to the topic. A big thank you to Meta again for making this discussion possible, and most importantly, a big thank you to all of you for taking the time out to listen to this and for sharing your questions as well. We got to as many of those as we possibly could through this discussion. So that is all from me. I do hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And once again, thank you to my panelists and thank you to all of you for participating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.